Welcome back, all my fight fans. Today we're going to be breaking down UFC 310. Just took place last night. It was an awesome card. Couple weird moments throughout, so I can't wait to talk about those today. As always, I'll run through the early prelims and the prelims a little bit quicker, and then I'll spend some more time on that main card. If you guys like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends. It helps boost this channel and the algorithm. With that all out of the way, let's get into the breakdown. Kicking off the early prelims with the first fight of the night, we had a heavyweight bout between Kennedy Nzechukwu and Brzeski, and this fight went exactly how I predicted. Kennedy has a little bit too much power for guys outside of the top 15, so I can't wait to see him face a top 15, a top 10 fighter at heavyweight. This guy looks like a destructive force at heavyweight, so I'm super excited to see how his career turns out. Next up, we had a lightweight bout between the 42-year-old Clay Guida and the 25-year-old Chase Hooper. Again, this fight went pretty much exactly how I predicted. Round 1 submission for Chase Hooper. He got an armbar, actually, that he was learning in the back room with Mikey Mushishi just like a couple hours before the fight, which is kind of cool. And yeah, fantastic job by Chase Hooper. I hope to see big things from him in the future as well. Next up, we had a bout at welterweight between Michael Chiesa and Max Griffin. Again, this is kind of how I predicted this fight to go. Michael Chiesa kind of dominating throughout, Max Griffin having his moments, but Chiesa finally finding that submission in the third round. Next up, we had a flyweight bout between Cody, Durden, and Joshua Van. And going into this one, I was incredibly excited to watch this fight because Joshua Van brings it every time he fights. I really want to see this kid get a quick turnaround and fight somebody else. We need more challengers at flyweight. And Joshua Van, even though he is very young, I believe he's like 23 or something, he looks like to be a very bright prospect in this division. So I'm excited to see his future play out. And lastly, on the early prelims, we had kind of a sad catchweight bout between Chris Weidman and Eryk Anders. Chris Weidman had some moments in the first round, and then in the second round, Eryk Anders did to Chris Weidman what Chris Weidman used to do to everybody and kind of just ground and pounded him out and got a TKO in the second round. So good for Eryk Anders. I know he wants to get to I think it's like 10 fights in the UFC or something. He wants to get to some round number, so I think he has 2 more fights to go. Chris Weidman, on the other hand, this was probably the last time we see him in the octagon. After this fight, Dana White said that he wants to see Chris Weidman, Clay Guida, and who was the other guy? There's a third name there that he wants to see retire. I'll remember it later, but yeah. Not a great look for Chris Weidman in his last fight. That was kind of sad to see. I know going into that fight, I said I wasn't really a Chris Weidman fan, so I was kind of cheering for him to lose, but I didn't want to see him lose like that. That was a little bit sad. But speaking of sad fights, that's not the only one we had tonight. I'm going to move on to the early prelims, or we just finished the early prelims. I'll move on to the prelims now. So, kicking off the prelims, we had an awesome fight between Randy Brown and Bryan Battle. This was not the absolute drag-em-out war that I think a lot of us were expecting, but it was still a really fun fight. Bryan Battle got the nod in this one via decision. Next up, we had a featherweight bout that should have been on the main card. This fight, actually, it should have been like a co-main event, or it should have been a main event on a fight night. This fight definitely needed to be 5 rounds, and I think that's why a lot of people are saying robbery. Again, I've said this before, don't yell robbery at every single fight. It seems like every single decision now in the UFC, there's just people in the comment sections going robbery, robbery, robbery. Just because the guy who you thought won or the guy who you were cheering for didn't win does not mean it was a robbery. There are a lot of close fights in the UFC. Not all of them are robberies. There was a fight later on this card that might have been a robbery, but again, it was a little bit borderline. I think we need to reserve that term for fights that are absolute robberies, but anyways, I digress. Movsar, Evloev, and Aljamain Sterling. I thought it was a close fight. You know, there was a lot of amazing grappling sequences throughout this fight. It was a really, really fun fight to watch as a grappler, and I thought Evloev did a great job at countering Aljamain's wrestling and jiu-jitsu with that high-level Russian wrestling. So I thought Evloev did a great job. I had him winning at the end of it, but I can totally understand why some people may have scored it 2-1 or possibly even 3-0 for Aljo, but I had Evloev winning 2-1. I could have scored 3 rounds for Evloev, but I gave Aljo one of those rounds. It was a fantastic fight. I want to see this one ran back. I want to see it 5 rounds next time. I think both of these guys, with how high their skill levels are, how high their gas tank is, I think we need to see them in a 5-round fight. But Evloev, man, he said he wants to turn around quick. He wants to fight again in 2 months. He doesn't want to wait another year, and I want to see him fight for the belt because I think he's probably the toughest test for Ilia Topuria, just with the skill set that he has. It's going to be hard for Ilia to take that guy out. So, awesome performance by Evloev. Then we had a welterweight bout between Vicente Luque and Themba Gorimbo. And this fight didn't even last a minute, man. I was going into this fight, I was telling you guys, I'm kind of leaning towards the Gorimbo guy. He seems like an up-and-coming prospect. I'd probably put my money there, but I'm definitely cheering for Luque because I remember how he was 3 or 4 years ago, and I want that Luque to come back, and I want him to make a statement. And boy, did he make a statement last night. First round submission, got it in less than a minute, and it's the fastest anaconda choke in UFC history. So that's awesome to see by Luque. I really hope he can come back in that welterweight top 15 and shake some things up because when he's on, I think he's one of, if not the best welterweight on the planet. So awesome performance by Luque. I hope he stays in this form in the future. And then the headliner for the prelims was one of the weirdest and saddest fights I've ever seen in my life. So for those of you who don't know, Anthony Smith lost his trainer and best friend a couple weeks before this fight. And he was crying, walking out and doing his inspection before the octagon. He was in tears. He couldn't really control his emotions. It was very sad to see. You know, Anthony Smith's a guy with over 50 fights, and basically all of them were with this guy, his best friend. I'm forgetting his name right now, but that was really sad to see. And throughout the fight, he was kind of letting his guard down, telling Dominick Reyes, like, hit me, like he wanted to feel pain. He wasn't really in there to fight. He was kind of in there to get beat up. And I've never really seen that before. It was sad and dark, and it just left a weird taste in everybody's mouth for a little bit, but the fights on the main card made up for it. But I can't just talk about Anthony Smith in this. Obviously, it sucked. This was the other guy that Dana White was saying should retire, and I agree. Anthony Smith has a great future as an analyst. He should probably retire from fighting, especially if he lost the guy who he loved doing it with. Dominick Reyes, though, fantastic performance. It's exactly what I expect from him. This is what he should be doing to everybody, just body kicking them, beating them up. And he's one of the best fighters in this division. I really want him to go on a long win streak. Like I said in my prediction video, I don't think either of these guys are going to be facing Pereira, but Dominick Reyes is one of those guys. He had that really close fight with John Jones. Maybe he could have a close fight with Pereira. Maybe he could beat Pereira. I don't know. But fantastic performance for Dom. It's awesome to see him come back. He had those 3 knockout losses in a row, and as a John Jones fan, that felt good at the time. But you know, you don't want to see any human being get knocked out that many times. It's not good. So let's move on to the main card. Kicking off the main card, we had an awesome bout between Nate Landwehr and Doo Ho Choi. I know a lot of people were expecting a war here. A lot of people were expecting a fight of the night contender. It wasn't quite that. I think the matchmakers overlooked Doo Ho Choi in this one. He put on a boxing clinic. He showed great skills in every single facet of the fight. And Doo Ho Choi looks like a completely new fighter than when he first debuted at, I think he was like 23 years old or something like that. He was quite young when he first came to the UFC. But at, I think, 30 years old now, he's looking like a completely different fighter. And I think he could be a problem for some people at featherweight. That guy has amazing boxing skills, and he put it on display against Nate Landwehr, who he's no slouch. He's a good fighter himself. He didn't quite have... He was never hitting first in this fight, and he was there to be hit. So unfortunately, he got beat up pretty bad, and he got obviously knocked out or TKO'd in the 3rd round there. So fantastic performance by Doo Ho Choi. I really want to see some other big fights from him at featherweight. Hopefully he can get into the rankings sometime soon. Next up at featherweight, we had a bout that definitely should have been on the prelims. Even as a Kron Gracie fan, I know I was gassing him up in the predictions. This was the one prediction that I was like deadly wrong about, and I apologize for that. But going into this fight, I'm somebody who was a big fan of Kron Gracie, watching his grappling career. I knew what he was capable of on the ground. He hasn't shown that in the UFC. He's shown that in the first fight against Caceres and his previous fights outside of the UFC, but with Cub Swanson, with Air Jordan, and here with Bryce Mitchell, he hasn't really been able to put that grappling on guys. I don't think he has any takedowns at all besides pulling guard. And it's sad to see, because you think of the Gracies, you think of, Royce, you think of the early Gracies, Rickson, the ones that did a lot in MMA and who were successful, and to have a Gracie here who has no success in MMA and looks completely out of place. I mean, his striking tonight looked bad. Kron Gracie looks like he's been boxing for a couple months. Like, I honestly think that if I went into a UFC fight and started throwing hands, I might look a little bit more fluid than Kron Gracie. And that's not saying much. I would look pretty shitty if I got into a UFC fight compared to the fighters that are in there. But Kron Gracie's striking, I'm just trying to emphasize that it's very lackluster. It's not smooth at all. Yeah, I don't know what to say anymore. I said third round submission, and he pulled guard in that third round, and Bryce Mitchell caught onto it. He put his arm right across his chest, and he slammed him right on the ground, and he hit him with 2 good elbows, and that was it. Kron was out. I know Kron got close in the second round with that armbar, but man, Kron just looked horrible in this fight. He hasn't looked good, and he's 36 years old. He's probably going to get cut now. And yeah, it's just sad to see. I was really hyped up. I was a huge fan of Rickson Gracie growing up. I read his books, watched the documentary. That was like my guy, and Kron Gracie was his son, and I'm like, this is the prodigy. He's going to come to the UFC and just strangle everybody. And yeah, he looks completely amateurish with the striking. It's horrible. Like I said, I think I would look better in there than Kron. Like, it was not a good look. Moving on from that fight, I apologize for getting that one absurdly wrong, but we had a heavyweight bout, which I got this one correct, but I don't know if I should have gotten this one correct. It's between Ciryl Gane and Volkov. At the end of the fight, optics-wise, Gane was on his back for the last 4 minutes of the fight. He gets up, he walks out of the cage. He says to Joe Rogan, like, I don't like that performance. I think I lost. I think people are somewhat right in saying that this one was a robbery. Again, I think you could score round 1 and 2 for Gane. Just the way the third round ended. We should almost have pride rules. I think the fight should be judged as a whole. I don't think they should be judged round by round, because I think this is why there's so much corruption in boxing too. I think judges, maybe they don't switch their scorecards, but just the way the scorecards play out, they don't always make for a result that reflects the feeling of the fight at the end of it, if that makes any sense. So I don't know. It was a weird fight. I thought Gane had some good moments. I thought Volkov did amazing. I want to see a trilogy here, because I don't really think they're 2-0. I feel like it's like 1-1 or 1-0-1. I'm not too sure, but I'd like to see this one ran back. Again, maybe we could do that, because we still have to get the Tom Aspinall and John Jones fight out of the way, so maybe they could run this one back one more time, maybe do it for 5 rounds. I think that's the way to go with these two guys, and yeah, the heavyweight division's a little clogged up right now, so it is what it is. But moving on to the co-main event, we had Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary. So happy this was 5 rounds. They need to start doing this more. Anytime you have guys that are this high skill level, you need to offer both of them the chance to do it 5 rounds. I think with Evloev, you had a guy that was so highly ranked. He was 18-0. He fought an M1. He's like a fantastic fighter. And then you had a former champion in Aljamain. That should be a 5-round fight. This was also a 5-round fight, which is fantastic. Both guys, we know going into it, were undefeated. Shavkat had 18 finishes. Ian Gary had trained with him before. He actually got tapped out by Shavkat in training. So I predicted it as a 4th-round submission for Shavkat. Funny enough, Ian Gary almost got a submission on Shavkat at one point in the fight and almost finished it by a rear naked choke. That was actually the closest the fight came to a finish, which was very impressive by Ian. So for me, this fight couldn't have gone any better. I'm a big fan of Shavkat. I want that guy to fight for the belt. I think he's going to demolish Bilal. I think this was the best result for him. He didn't look perfect, but he had some good moments throughout the fight. He showed the power that he has in his hands. He showed some flashy kicks. Some of them landed. I think those kicks would land more on Bilal. He's a little bit more stationary than Gary, and Gary's long and lengthy. It's a little bit harder to land those kicks on a guy like that. So Shavkat, for me, impressed quite a bit. I think he won 3 to 4 rounds. Definitely 3. You can argue maybe 4. That third round would probably give to Gary, though. And Gary, man, couldn't have had a better result for him either. Obviously, he would have wanted to win, but I think he showed out in this one, taking this fight on short notice, taking it to a decision. Shavkat's never been to a decision, and getting that close to finishing the boogeyman of the division. I think that was an awesome performance for both men. I think both men's stocks went up after this, even though Ian Gary lost his 0. I think everybody's going to respect him a lot more after this. I know we like to dump on the guy because his wife's like twice his age and stuff, but man, he puts it out there. When he gets in the cage, he puts it on, and he puts on amazing performances, and he brings the fight every single time. I know he would have liked more striking against MVP, but fantastic performance by both men. So I can't wait to see how the welterweight division shakes out. It's one of the most stacked divisions right now. So moving on, we have one of the... well, I would like to think in my mind that the flyweight division's stacked, but at this point it seems like Pantoja's just cleared out the entire division. The first round between Pantoja and Asakura was close-ish. I don't know. Asakura was landing some big knees, some big shots, but they didn't really seem to rock Pantoja the way that they rocked other fighters in Rizin. So Pantoja came back with his own flurries and rocked Kai a couple times. I think he even had a flash knockdown there in the first round. And his grappling, man, Pantoja's so damn scary. Like, I really would love to see that Figgy fight ran back, because him and Figgy, to me, are just by far the most talented and impressive guys at 125. And I know Figgy's now a bantamweight, and I know Moreno's still awesome too, but there's just something about those two guys, how great they are on the ground, how explosive they are, how much power they have. I just want to see Figgy versus Pantoja all day long. I know Figgy probably can't cut that weight anymore, but man, there's something about those two guys. I really think they're kind of the best flyweights underneath Demetrius Johnson. And obviously Pantoja called out DJ after this fight, calling him to come back out of retirement to settle who's the GOAT. I don't think Pantoja is going to catch Demetrius Johnson's records for title defenses. However, I don't think he has to. I think if he got to even 5 to 8 defenses against some really high-level guys, that could put him in the conversation maybe next to DJ. I know DJ's record's always going to be more impressive, but DJ has some losses himself. And DJ, as much as I love him, some of the names that he defended against, not that great. The names that Pantoja's been defending against, much better names, much more high-quality names. So Pantoja, when it's all said and done, might actually have a stronger record when you look at the people who he defended against. So I don't know. I don't know how the GOAT conversation will shake out at the end of things when we talk about the flyweights. I think Pantoja is the best flyweight I've ever seen. It's hard to say because Demetrius Johnson was so special. But people only really look to like a couple moments. They look to that Ray Borg transition, which, first of all, it's Ray Borg. I don't want to put Ray Borg down, but I don't think Demetrius Johnson's doing that same technique to Henry Cejudo. And I don't know. Pantoja, to me, has a little bit more power. He might be better on the ground than DJ. It's hard to say. I would really like to see that fight play out. I know DJ is almost 40 years old now, so it's not really the fight that we all need to see or want to see right now, but I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments. How do you guys compare those two? Because that's kind of where my mind went immediately after this fight. No disrespect to Kai. I mean, he had a great performance. He's a flashy, hard-hitting flyweight. I'm sure he's going to beat some top guys. I'm sure he's going to be back there to challenge for the belt again. He's a guy who's worked his way back to title shots multiple times throughout his career, so I'm sure Kai will be back, and he looked great in that fight. But as soon as it went to the ground, Pantoja is a monster. He's an absolute cannibal, and that was a scary performance. The way he climbed the back, the way he got the transitions, he did not stop. That's what you would like to see from Kron Gracie. Never going to happen. But that's the kind of fighting that you would like to see from a guy like Kron, and Pantoja, to me, is probably the best grappler I think we've ever seen at flyweight. And that's saying a lot because we've seen guys like DJ, Henry Cejudo, but there's something about Pantoja that's just scary, man. The way he got Kai out of there, that was scary. And yeah, I want to hear from you guys, though. How do you guys compare Pantoja to Demetrius Johnson? How do you guys compare him to the other flyweight champions? Right now, I'd probably go DJ, Pantoja, Figgy, Moreno, and then, damn, I'm forgetting the other guy. You guys will let me know in the comments. I know there's 5 of them, but yeah, that's basically all I have for today, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of the fights. Let me know what you guys want to see matchmaking-wise with Shavkat Rakhmonov, with Pantoja, with Kai. Who do you guys want to see these guys fight next? Let me know all that stuff down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, it means the world to me. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.